Good afternoon to everybody. As John said, I'm going to be talking about the common swine industry audit today. A bit of background and history. So our industry has a 25-year record of providing quality assurance. Started in 1989 when our focus was on food safety and has morphed over time to include animal handling, transportation, animal care, with the culmination of the introduction of the Pork Quality Assurance Plus program in 2007. As you know, that program has three primary elements, the first being education with our producers, certification, producers working through the 10 good production practices with their PQA Plus advisor. The second step being on-farm site assessment, which is an educational benchmarking component, also done with the PQA Plus advisor. And the final component was a third-party verification process, which was really meant to be an external measurement of the success of the program and provide us some background data on areas of improvement for our industry. However, we did start to see a shift in 2012, 2013, where we had more and more packers that were looking for on-farm verification and third-party audits, particularly for animal care and animal welfare. That got our board of directors asking some questions about how we avoid the British experience if this is becoming more and more popular. Particularly, how do we avoid multiple auditors coming onto the farm auditing multiple criteria? Also, can the industry agree to one set of criteria? And if they can, what's the future of PQA Plus? Does it continue to serve a purpose and have a role for our industry? And finally, how can we position the U.S. Industry in a global marketplace? As you know, exports are an incredibly important component to our industry, and we want to make sure that we are positioning ourselves from a food safety and animal welfare standpoint to be able to meet the expectations of our international customers as well. So in the Industry Audit Task Force was actually a result of actions that happened at Pork Forum in 2013 and 2014. Delegates those 2 years introduced and passed a resolution asking for Pork Board to facilitate a group of packers and producers to identify ways to come up with a common criteria, a common set of audit points that would be recognized by the industry to reduce duplication. So upon passing those two resolutions, our board of directors allocated resources to fund the Industry Audit Task Force and their efforts. So this is a group of packers, producers, and retail and food service customers from throughout the industry. Their particular purpose was to facilitate and develop a workable, credible, and affordable on-farm verification system, primarily for animal welfare, but that scope grew to include on-farm food safety as well. They wanted to duplicate or eliminate duplication of audits and minimize administrative burden on producers, as well as try and build consensus on a consistent set of criteria. And their last objective was to really standardize the process to provide consistency for the industry, but also protecting herd health, which became critically important about 3 months later with the detection of PEDV within the U.S. So over an 18-month period, the task force worked to develop a common audit standard, and through that process also did a beta testing process. They took the standard that they had created out to over 120 farms to get a sense of how long it would take to make sure that the scoring criteria were an adequate reflection of what was actually occurring on the farm, to gather input from those people that are actually conducting third-party audits out in the countryside, and also to submit the audit to the Professional Animal Auditor Certification Organization as an independent body for their review of the audit to establish credibility with our customers. So after the beta test, we were really able to refine and adapt the audit to make it stronger and more clear, and ultimately received PACO certification for the audit. So introducing the audit, it was released late October of 2014. The document on the right is the Common Swine Industry Audit. You can find all of the audit materials on our website at pork.org/common audit. Within that document are audit instructions. It specifically covers what the scope of the audit is and provides instructions for auditors on how to conduct the audit. The scope of the audit covers from birth of the animal to transport from the farm, and it also covers animal welfare and pre-harvest food safety on the farm. There's also a lengthy section on biosecurity, instructing auditors to follow biosecurity protocols that are established by the farm, and in the absence that a farm doesn't have a biosecurity protocol, there is one provided. That basic biosecurity protocol was created by in conjunction with the American Association of Swine Veterinarians to provide that baseline biosecurity protocol. Also within the document are the audit standards, and I'll cover exactly what's in that in the next slide, as well as the audit tool, which are the specific questions that the auditor asks to measure against the audit standard. There's also a corrective action template, as well as a series of frequently asked questions about the who, what, when, where, and why of how the audit was created and developed. There's also a section of the website dedicated to resources, and that resource page includes fact sheets and education materials, as well as record keeping and standard operating procedure templates that producers can use to help come into compliance with the audit standard. The last point on the slide is to point out that there's no branding on the common swine industry audit. It's not labeled as a checkoff document because checkoff merely served as a facilitator in the discussion, and it's not branded so that anyone and everyone within the industry can pick it up and utilize the audit within their quality assurance scheme. The audit standard itself is divided into a couple of sections. The first section are the critical criteria, and you'll notice that there are only two points or two areas covered within that section, and that's willful acts of abuse as well as humane euthanasia. The task force felt that those were two very critical components of the audit and elevated to that status. Those items listed in green are animal-based measures or benchmarking measures. Blue ones are facilities. The purple ones are record keeping and are worth the least amount of points in the audit. And then those three areas in black are the food safety criteria within the audit. Those items that are within the boxes are criteria that are currently within the PQA Plus site assessment. So if you've had a PQA Plus site assessment, these items should be very familiar to you. Those items outside of the box, most all of them are already included in the education component of PQA Plus, but not necessarily the site assessment. So again, not necessarily new, but they are being elevated and being measured on the farm. In terms of scoring, there are only those criteria that were in red. If you remember, there were two: willful acts of abuse and humane euthanasia are the only two categories that have a pass-fail score. Everything else is worth a point value. It's a numerical score, and you either earn all of the points or none of the points for that particular criteria. And the point of that is to reduce subjectivity from the auditors so that either it's a yes or a no question and is very clearly defined. You'll notice that the audit summary chart on the right is how audit scores are ultimately reported. And so you'll see that there are total scores as well as section and subsection scores. And the purpose of that is to provide context to scores that are achieved on the audit. So it paints a very different picture if a site receives a score of 80, but most of the points are lost because of record keeping versus those points that are actual animal related. Defining a passing score, the Industry Audit Task Force, because of their makeup and their structure, were not able to define what one single passing score for the industry. So the defining passing score is really set by the individual marketplace in which a producer sells. To clarify on audits versus assessments, we want to point out that these are two very different functions with two very different objectives. Assessments are meant to be educational and benchmarking and provide measurement and feedback to the farm, but are either performed by first party, either someone on the farm, or second party being your veterinarian or your extension or educator or your PQA Plus advisor. And that's really filled by the role of the PQA Plus site assessment. Third party audits are meant to be a snapshot in time, meant to be objective. They are not, there's no educational component to an audit. In fact, if an auditor is offering consultation, that is outside of their scope and they should not be doing that. But it is completed by an objective third party, meaning that they have no personal or financial interest within the site in which they're auditing. And that's really the role that the common industry audit plays. So if often we're asked, if I've had an assessment, does that count as an audit? And conversely, if I've had an audit, does that count as an assessment? And the answer to both of those questions are no, again, because they have very different objectives and purposes. Questions about implementation. As I'd mentioned, Chekhov was really the facilitator of the discussion to establish the common audit. Implementation of the common audit is left to the individual marketplace. And so a lot of these questions, the answers to these questions will depend on the marketplace where the pigs are sold. But what the audit does is it provides one consistent criteria, so regardless of where you sell pigs, the questions are always the same. Next steps and PQA+. For the industry audit, we're working to create visual resources to partner with the language within the audit, the common audit, particularly for those animal-based or benchmarking measures. The Professional Animal Auditor Certification Organization, or PACO, they're working on creating an auditor training program to be out later this summer, where people who are interested in becoming third-party auditors have some sort of training specific to the audit to help with that inter- and intra-observer reliability. We also are having ongoing discussions on data management and aggregation, with the ultimate goal being that we have aggregation of the industry audit data to be able to give us, as an industry, an idea of where we stand and where we have opportunities for improvement. Industry Audit Task Force ongoing efforts, much like PQA+, it isn't a one and done. The Audit Task Force will continue to meet on an annual basis to identify areas for improvement. And PQA+ revisions. So our PQA+ Task Force has asked that within the next revision that we look at matching the education and the site assessment content with what's been written in the Common Industry Audit. So as you know, PQA+ is revised every 3 years, and the next revision is due out in 2016. So we're working on content now and working to try and match those two pieces more so that they're more closely aligned. And the last point is that, as I mentioned early on, that PQA+ had a third-party verification component. And with the introduction of the Common Swine Industry Audit, it's the intent that that would take the place of that third-party verification within PQA+. And the final note I'll leave with you is that while we've talked a lot about auditing, this really is only one component of a more comprehensive approach. It starts with the people on the farm, making sure that we have the right training. If we're hiring people, they've been properly screened and have good orientation. Training, which could include PQA+ and TQA, but is really more focused on the daily duties that are expected of our employees, management, and really establishing barn culture as well as standard operating procedures, with the next step being site assessment, whether that's first-party and or second-party assessments, and then finally the third-party audit, which is really a snapshot in time, again, verifying animal well-being as well as food safety. So in summary, the only thing that stays the same is change. We have a 25-year history of quality assurance within the pork industry, and PQA+, as well as the Common Industry Audit, will continue to evolve over time as expectations of our industry change. And really embracing a comprehensive assurance process, which auditing is really only one component of that. And as we communicate that with customers, we're very clear in that message. And finally, the Common Swine Industry Audit is now available and for everyone to use. It's our understanding that all of the major packers are committed to adopting this within their auditing programs going forward.